There are just some anime out in the world that never really see a clear conclusion. They seem to be abruptly dropped, and fans just wonder, why is there no continuation? Why is there no conclusion? Why does it end where it ends? In other words, anime that should have at least one more season or so to tell a conclusion and finish off the entire plot line that they're going for. Right here, right now, I'm going to be doing a top 10 list of the top 10 anime that I believe need at least one more season to tell the rest of their story. Stay tuned for it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Number 10, Princess Jellyfish. Now, Princess Jellyfish is technically kind of like almost a comedic slice of life type anime that details the life of Tsukimi, who is technically a jellyfish otaku. That's kind of where the Princess Jellyfish name comes from, who lives in a all-girl, all-female boarding house type situation, no men allowed. And basically, it's her adventures, like, kind of getting to know this character called Kuranosuke, who is a cross-dresser from a rich family in that part of Tokyo, rich, like, businessman, business family in Tokyo. And it's basically about him being a cross-dresser and trying to connect between Tsukimi and her friends, and them trying to hide his identity that he's actually a guy, because he could be kicked out because of it. And the whole anime kind of goes over, Kuranosuke's brother Shu, his half brother, and some affair he technically has with Shoko, who's like a business lady that's trying to sell their apartment. And basically, the main point of at least where the anime currently is them saving that apartment, saving that boarding house, because that's all they could really live, the only place they could really live. But at the end, basically, the brother leaves on a flight with basically separating himself from that lady who is trying to get an affair on him to try to go after the family, but then you kind of see that they're almost falling in love with each other, and they leave. And then it just feels like there's more going on between with Kuranosuke's brother and her, and there's kind of like something kind of coming up between Tsukimi and Kuranosuke, as well as him trying to show her this different type of beauty, her inner beauty, dressing her up and making her look nice. And it just feels like there's more of a story going on. And one major plot, and that's basically because the anime basically was still, the anime was in 2010, while the manga, as far as I researched, is still going to this day. So there's still a manga story going on at this time. And the anime that was at the time was probably what it was at the time, so there's more story to go off of now. And I do think there's a romance, like I said, between those characters, and I do feel that there's the chance that Kuranosuke could be found out later in the series. I've never actually read the manga, and I do think there's more story to Princess Jellyfish to actually give it at least one more season, so we could see some more crazy, comedic, romantic interactions between all these characters. Number 9, Ouran High School Host Club. Ouran High School Host Club is essentially a romantic comedy type anime with some slice of life elements that details the life of Haruhi, who's attending a rich neighborhood, rich, like, very specific for like higher, like, financially enabled families sending their kids out to the Ouran Academy. She basically becomes a member of a host club, a male host club that panders to the girls of the school, and she has to, in order to pay off a debt that she owes to this club for messing up one of their vases inside their club room, she has to pretend to be a boy and actually join in on their daily lives as members of this host club. And it's a very comedic, very romantic anime, and I think another season can really bring that out. It actually is a pretty popular anime as well. I do see a lot of people that really like this anime as well. And it, just like I mentioned with Princess Jellyfish, and it's going to be very, very popular topic that pops up amongst most of these animes on this list, is it is an anime that when the manga was was still being made, they made the anime and they didn't really finish it. The anime came out in 2006, and I think the manga finished around 2010. So now they do have a clear conclusion from the manga that make an ending for this series. And it does touch on the topics of Tomoki's mother and what happens to her at the end, but it doesn't really go into super in depth on that topic, and that could be something another season or two could really brush out. And now that it has a finished manga, they can go back and do another season or two. And like I said, it's a very popular anime, and I do think a lot of people would really like to see a continuation to this anime and see more stories with Tamaki, who is the head character, the head leader of this host club, and Haruhi, the main character, and all the other host club members, and all the characters they interact with. There's enough to go around with the rest of the manga, I'm sure, to add enough story, and there's enough demand from fans to the point where I do believe they would want another season or two so we could see these beloved characters and see where the story goes after the events where the season one basically ends off at, where the series we have now ends off at, and where it would go next. Number 8, Fruits Basket. Now, when it comes to Fruits Basket, it is the oldest anime I do have on this list, and it's really not all that old. It came out in the early 2000s, and because of its date, I doubt that there's going to ever be an actual continuation for this anime, so that's probably why it's a little bit lower on the list, but I do think there's enough story to it to basically add to another season or two all these years later. Was a pretty popular anime from what I know. I really loved it. It was one of my favorite animes back in the day, and I would love to see a continuation on it. It's basically a story of this girl, Toru Honda, who's technically kind of homeless, and she eventually moves into the house of one of her classmates, at Yuki Soma, and lives with the Soma family and learns about the Soma family curse, which connects to the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. And basically, the details a very comedic, romantic, almost slice of life, but not really, but really kind of very romantic comedy story amongst her trying to live in with this family and go amongst the issues that they are having and what this curse brings to their family and what it allows them to do and not to do. And basically, the manga, as far as I looked up, continued until 2006, but the anime was around like 2001, 2002. So whatever anime they were able to do was only based off the manga from back then, which means there was more story to tell. And this is a thing in each and every one of these animes, for the most part, that I'm going to be talking about on this list. They went on during the manga. When it was still going, thus they didn't get the entire story. And when you finish the anime of Fruits Basket, you could tell there is more story to go on. They're going to continue living their lives. And we would like to see that continuation in their lives, because basically the major part of this first season of what we so far have in Fruits Basket is about Toru getting used to this family, and then the whole torments of Kyo based off how he fits into this curse, and how he fits into the family specifically. And like I said, it's a pretty popular show and people love it, but there's more to it. Most importantly, there's like 2 or 3 key characters, like especially from the Soma family, that are never even mentioned in the show. And whether or not that was them making the show and then not them cutting out characters, or they were introduced later on in the manga after the anime was technically finished, I don't know. But there's more characters to introduce, more story to introduce, and I would certainly love to see Fruits Basket get at least one more season. Number 7, Black Lagoon. Now, Black Lagoon is technically a semi-mature, kind of dark anime story about the Lagoon Company, which is technically modern-day for-hire pirates and the missions they get put on to do for various different criminal organizations and the jobs that they technically do in the show, in their little universe. And it's basically about the missions they continuously go on. And basically, I do see it as a pretty popular anime. Very interesting characters. A lot of people love Revi. She's probably one of the most famous female anime characters of all time. And other people like Dutch and Rock and Benny from the Lagoon Company, add to the team, and various interesting characters that this group meets during their missions, these various criminal organizations and people that they work with and they fight against. It's kind of an interesting, kind of dark story when you see some of the backstories on some of these characters. And it does end on a pretty open-ended note. They finish their last mission, which kind of changes some of the characters up a little bit, how they meet these characters and how they end up at the end. Not trying to spoil it too much there, but it seems like there's still more continuous missions that they can go on, more continuous stories. And I'm not talking about Roberta's blood trail. That's kind of its own little side thing. That's not really a continuation. But as far as I've seen, like I've mentioned, the last three of these things, the manga is still supposedly going on, so there's still more story there. The light novel, I think, ended around 2008, and the anime, the first season, I think, was about 2006. The first two seasons, I think, and Roberta's Blood Trail was like 2011. So at least in terms of them doing some sort of anime adaptation there, it is still a bit recent, and I do think I see enough demand for it. But there's just enough like story there, I think, that really could add to you wanting to see these cool badass characters just fighting and do criminal organizations and stuff like that. And it just feels like there's more story to it, especially with their main organization leader they work with, Balalaika, because near the end of it there does seem to be some confrontation with her, and I do think she becomes the main antagonist later on. I never really read the manga, and I think them leading towards that and seeing more of a connection between the backstories on some of these characters like Rock and Revi and Balalaika, diving into her more, would actually add for another interesting season. And it's not the one I want to see a season most for, but I certainly would like to see one, and I think a lot of anime fans would really agree with me on that. Number 6, Heaven's Lost Property. When it comes to Heaven's Lost Property, it's a very, very ecchi comedy-based show that has some sort of sense of romantic stuff in it, and it does have its own sense of action and fighting and adventure to it as well, but it is very, very ecchi and very, very, you know, trying to do fan service type stuff. But it does have an overlying story to it, which I actually was quite interested in. As much as it's a very comedic show that kind of pushes the story to the back, I really actually kind of, when I watched the show, got interested in it and wanted to see this story dive. And this story kind of spread out amongst itself between all this comedic stuff and all this fan servicey stuff, but every time they delved more into Icarus and the world she came from, it's just these angeloids and what they mean and what they're doing there and where they came from and why they're there and where, who's controlling them and who leads this world is actually really interesting. The ecchi comedic fan service stuff is cool too, but I was interested in that story, and I really want to see a continuation of that, and I do think a lot of people would want to see something too. And the main thing is it ends on a note where they never beat the villain. The main villain that runs these angeloids and tries to take out the main set of cast of characters is never defeated in the anime. But he is defeated in the manga because the manga finished, I think, about last year, like 2014, but the anime was back like in 2009, so they never got to that part of the anime. And all the stories, they reveal on some of the backstories of the characters and who these characters technically are and what happens to some of them, like the main character and his friends, and especially one of the cast of characters I did look up, and how she's connected to the Angeloid world and stuff like that. Basically, there's untold manga stories that happened after the fact that the anime was made. And the movies that they made for this series that were more side stories, like that Clockwork Angeloid movie that just recently came out, I think, like, what, last year, year before? I think last year, sometime 2014. Didn't really add a whole lot. And I don't think the one before that did either. I didn't really watch them, but I did look up the premise of them, and they don't really add much to continue the story. And at the end of the story, it's very open-ended. The villain's not defeated. And it just feels like there should be more. There should be more, and we should have a clear conclusion, because it seems like they never really accomplished much by the end of the series, and that's one thing I would really like to do. And if it dives us back into this world of their epic fan service and fighting and comedy and all these cool characters like Icarus and Delta and, all these other characters, so be it. I want to see it, and I think other people would agree with me too. Number 5. Blue Exorcist. Now, Blue Exorcist is an adventure shonen-esque type anime that details the story of Rin and Yukio Okumura, brothers that are technically the spawns of Satan, the half humans, half demons, the sons of Satan, and how they become exorcists in their adventures with their friends and partners, and how they deal with this bull crap going on, the fact that they're the sons of Satan, and how Rin has all the the devil powers and how Yukio, until later on, there is a spoiler there, has no powers, but he gets his powers, and like how they're technically outcasts and he has to keep it hidden, and then eventually they find out and they have to fight Satan, and Rin wants to kill Satan and learn about the history of his mother and Father Fujimoto, who's technically was her friend and taking care of them. And it's just a cool show that has comedy to it, but it has a lot of action. It's just a nice balance. Nice balance, I think. Really, really nice balance. But it seems like the manga, I think, apparently looking it up, is actually still going. So there is more story to be told because the anime came out like in 2011. If the manga's still going, they obviously did not finish the entire story. Anything that happens beyond this is not told. And the last battle, as much as it actually is kind of built up, it really was not all that, interesting. It didn't really solve anything. They fight Satan, but they don't really fight Satan. Rin fights Yukio controlled by Satan, and they stop him and send him back to the demon world, and they don't really fight Satan, and it feels like that's a main plot point that could be added to another season or two. Them training to fight Satan legitimately, maybe turn more backstory on their mother and whatnot, get more interactions, relationships between Yukio, Rin, and their friends and partners and whatnot, and add more depth on backstory on some of these characters that were not told in the anime because they weren't told till later sections of the manga. And I think it would add up, it would build up a lot to an actual final battle because they built up to it, but the final battle, while interesting, wasn't super interesting, and it feels like Satan should make a bigger battle than what he did in that show, and it seems like the stuff that they didn't do that they didn't have a chance to do from the manga because the material wasn't written yet would add up to an interesting new one or two more seasons, and I don't think fans would really not want one. I'm sure there are people out there that want this and would be eagerly waiting for a new season. Number 4. The Devil is a Part-Timer. Now, The Devil is a Part-Timer is a very, very comedic anime that has action moments. It does seem to have more like a slice of life type of, ongoing life for these characters with action thrown in, although certain points of the anime, especially near the end, do pick up on the action, so it has a fair balance, but there are times when it focuses on one more than the other, especially earlier on in the series. But it basically is the telling of Satan and his assistant, General Ashia, coming from the world Ente Isla, which is like the world that is all magical based with demons fighting humans and whatnot. Their army being overrun, and they go and live in modern day Tokyo, and obviously Satan works as a member of the McDonald's team, a fast food place, take on McDonald's, and basically it's their adventures trying to live in that world, and they originally want to come to that world because they want to take it over and become, like they were in their world in Ente Isla, taking it over, and they want to go back to Ente Isla and take it over, and they're evil. But then you kind of see a change in heart from them. But then basically they beat the enemy at the end of the series, and they continue on their daily lives, and it's like there's more to be told for the story. The manga, as far as I looked it up, is still going on. They even have like a side story that's like that was a part-timer high school, so there's probably some high school related stuff going on there. The anime came out in 2013, but there's more manga story that came out after, which, like I mentioned before, seems to be a big part of these animes that come out. These anime that come out. They never really finish anywhere because the manga continues going when they're done. The story seems to continue, and it does seem like the problems that Ente Isla has, which they seem to have like a corrupt government, corrupt church, especially with these people sending these stuff out. Like you see backstory on some of these characters and them trying to get their missions done in some semi-dark ways and having these people get killed and whatnot. Like the church or the government or some leadership in that place is pretty corrupt, and I think that's a further story that they could develop on. And it seems like, what's going to become of Satan? What's going to become of Ashia? Are they going to go back and be evil in Ente Isla? Are they going to be good going back to Ente Isla? Are they going to stay in Japan and be good, stay in Japan and be bad? Like, what's going to happen to them? And like there seems to be relations building up, especially for Satan, between both Amelia the hero and his coworker Chiho. So two human-esque characters. Is there going to be something going on there? Is there some sort of love interest? And that's something that they really could do for another season. And I would truly want to see this. I just recently watched this, and I want to see more. The comedy, the romance, the fighting. There's more story to it, and we desperately, desperately need it. And other people, I think, would agree with me on that, because I certainly want to see more. Number 3, Blood Lad. Blood Lad is a very actiony shonen-esque show, kind of similar to something, let's say, like a Soul Eater, or like The Devil is a Part-Timer, but focusing a lot more on action, while still trying to balance out the comedy and the romantic type stuff. And it's very actiony based show, and it's basically about Staz, who's basically a vampire running his um, own gang in Demon World, and there's all these different gangs, and they're fighting for territories and whatnot. And there's this higher up like world that higher up demons live in, and he used to live there with his brother and whatnot, and so on and so forth. He decides to go down. He loses his powers. He gets his powers back, and it's basically about him. And he's basically a big time otaku. He collects video games, anime, and like various materials. He even, in one of the episodes, tries to do a Kamehameha. That's freaking awesome. Like, he's such a big otaku. He wants to go to Japan. He loves their culture. And when this human girl pops up, he's so interested in seeing her and going to see Japan and everything. And then the entire story happens, and something happens to her, and the adventures that he does to try to help her and her problems, and all the stuff that's revealed near the end of the anime. That basically, there's plot twists and interesting characters like Wolf, who's basically like his childhood friend, who's technically half werewolf, and basically Belle, who's like this very mysterious girl that plot twist at the end you find out about her, and well, should I say the end, at least with where the anime currently is at. And as far as I heard, just like everything else, the manga's still going, and the anime ended in 2013, and I do think the light novel still might be going too, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But here's the thing, and because the manga's still going, the anime ends on a big freaking cliffhanger with like 5 plot points that are big key things, some of which are actually introduced in the final episode. The final episode introduces some plot points that's never really told in the anime because, hey, they show what happened, they do the credits, they have this final scene that's very revealing for a big plot point later in the series, and then it says end. Like, what they could seriously do with these characters seem to be loved, and this story and world seem to be loved. I see quite a bit of people that like this show, and it's another show I just recently watched, and it's like, what the heck? There's all this stuff you could do, all these places you can go. Why don't you finish it? I mean, the anime just recently, like 2 years ago, finished. Like, okay, so there's been animes that came back from the dead, a lot longer time span than that. So there's still a very good chance, and there's a lot of manga that seems to still be told. So here's hoping they kind of do it, because that ending didn't really solve anything, at least for the anime. And you can't just say, "Oh, go read the manga." That's not. I don't believe in that, and I'd like to see an actual anime adaptation to conclude this story. Number 2, Sekirei. When it comes to Sekirei, it kind of falls into the same category that I would basically kind of put on Heaven's Lost Property, where it's very ecchi, but there's a big story behind it. But unlike that show, which is very ecchi, like for the sake of it, and very comedic for the sake of it, the etchiness and the comedic stuff fits into the action-oriented part of the show. Sekirei is still very action-oriented. It's just that the etchiness, the fan service, and the comedy comes along with all of that. And it's basically about the Sekireis, which are mostly female, but there are some male ones too that have like these special powers, and you find out where they originate from. They're not technically human, and they're thrown together in this Sekirei plan, the Sekirei game, where all of them have this Ashikabe, who's like this human character that basically is like their partner and their friend, and them trying to survive and be the last Ashikabe and Sekirei in this big giant tournament type thing, be the last to survive and go up to heaven and blah blah blah. It's kind of crazy, anime for craziness. And basically, the manga's still going, which big whoop-de freaking surprise there. It's been with every single one I've talked in this list. And the anime was in 2008, around like 2008, 2009-ish. So it ends on a cliffhanger. It actually ends. To be continued. Season 2 ends with to be continued. They're about halfway done with the Sekirei plan. They meet all these interesting characters. Some are partners, some are villains. The main character gets like 5 Sekirei, and he's fighting all these other people, and he's working alongside these certain Sekirei, and fighting against these other ones, and basically meets his mother and his father, which I think the guy is technically his father, the main villain dude, I'm not fully sure. And it's just like, the ending of Season 2 really builds up to, okay, they're going to go fight and end the Sekirei plan and see what's going to happen, and it leads nowhere. And this anime was done back in 2008. They haven't done their season in about 6-7 years. The Sekirei plan is still going on. It's a big main plan. There's like various levels and steps and rounds for it. So they're not even halfway done, so there's still more story to it, and due to the fact that the anime ended when the manga was still going on, and the manga is still going on, there's still more story to it. So basically, maybe they could wait until the manga is fully finished and then go on and do a season 3 and possibly season 4, finish this off, because I want to really see, and I'm very interested in the story. The fan service and the comedy comes along with it and makes it a whole package, but that action, that story, and those characters, I loved them a lot when I watched this show last year. And I want to see a conclusion. I want to see a finish. I want to see where it goes. And like I said, I don't like the whole go read the manga. I think that's bullcrap. I want to see an anime adaptation. If I want to go read the manga, I'd go read the manga. I want to see an anime finish. And the story needs to be continued because there's more to it. And I've seen other people that want the same thing. So if a lot of people want this, why couldn't we have it? Maybe it will take a few more years, but Sekirei needs at least one more season. I really would love to see it, and other people would too. And before we get to number 1, here are a few honorable mentions that were so close to making it to this list, but just barely missed the mark. A few more animes that I truly believe need at least one more season. And number 1, Spice and Wolf. Spice and Wolf is a very interesting anime. Kind of medieval times, some magical ability type stuff, focusing on trade, currency, money value and stuff. And when you think about that stuff, you think it'd be kind of boring, but it kind of makes it quite interesting. And maybe that's because it has some interesting characters like Lawrence and Holo, and very interesting stories that technically go on. But within 2 seasons, they don't finish the entire story. And why is that? Oh yeah, because the manga's still going on, and especially was still going on when they finished the anime. The anime came out in like 2008, 2009. The light novel ended, I think, around 2011, but the manga's still going on, so there's still technically some story, at least from what I'm seeing. I don't know if the manga actually has ended, but at least looking it up right now, it actually seems to be still going on, so there's still more story to be told, so maybe that's the reason why the anime doesn't really finish. But the whole point of why I really desperately, and this is why my number 1 is Spice and Wolf, want to see this in there, is not only because I love the world, I love the story, and I love the characters, and I want to see where it takes these people, and this friendship and romantic side between this goddess Holo and this human Lawrence, and where it's going to take them. But basically, the whole point of the anime, the story, when they first started off, is Holo wanted Lawrence to take her back home. It was either in the east or the west or whatever, and that was the main point of it. And as of season 2, you know what? They have yet to reach that point. They didn't finish the whole point of him taking her and trying to get her there. So there's still more story, and that obviously is because the manga wasn't done yet, and I don't think they wanted to rush the manga. I mean, they didn't want to rush the anime and give it a false ending like Fullmetal Alchemist technically originally had, even though the creators really wanted them to do their own ending. But basically, there's a whole story still left untold, and that's because the manga was still going on. And I wanted to have a needed anime conclusion, but I think first we need a manga conclusion before we have an anime conclusion. So that might take a few more years. And this anime is loved. These characters, these stories are loved. I see a ton of people online that love Spice and Wolf. I love Spice and Wolf, and I've only watched it last year. I love season 1. I love season 2. I want to see a conclusion. I want to see more story with these characters. And a lot of people would agree with me. A lot of people would say, you know what? I agree with you. I want to see another season. Because, you know what? Season 2 doesn't really end on a super high note. Lawrence and Holo get back together, and we're going to go off on a boat and go on our quest, and I'm going to take you home, and boom, nothing. And that's why it's my number 1. Spice and Wolf deserves an anime conclusion. It deserves, more so than any anime I would ever say, a season 3 and possibly a season 4. We need more Spice and Wolf. My name is Sniper's Fun. Peace. Please subscribe if you want to, and have a lovely day. I hope you guys like this list. Put in the comment section what you guys think. We can discuss it there. What animes do you think need another season or 2? And let's discuss it down there. See you all later.